My sister called me 3 hours before her wedding, and the first thing she said was, "Please don't let Dad see you here." I was standing in my apartment kitchen, still wearing the work shirt I had slept in after a 12-hour shift, and for a few seconds I honestly thought I had misheard her. "What do you mean, here?" I asked. She took a shaky breath. "At the wedding. If you come, stay outside until I tell you otherwise. And whatever you do, don't talk to Dad." My sister, Emily, had never sounded afraid of our father before. Angry, disappointed, exhausted, yes. Afraid, never. I leaned against the counter. What happened?" She went silent long enough that I could hear traffic through her phone. Then she whispered, "He found out you were invited." That made no sense. Emily had sent me the invitation herself 6 weeks earlier. I was supposed to sit beside our aunt near the front. I had even bought a new suit because, after everything our family had been through, I wanted to show up for her. "Dad knows I'm coming," I said. "He's the one who told me to be there early." Another silence. "He lied," she said. "He told me he would handle it." My stomach tightened. Our father, Richard, had spent most of my adult life making sure I understood that I was the difficult son. My younger brother, Daniel, could do no wrong. When Daniel bought a house, Dad helped with the down payment. When I started my own small repair business, Dad told relatives I was playing handyman. When Mom died, Dad gave Daniel her jewelry and kept the family photo albums locked away. I never fought him over any of it. I just stopped expecting fairness. But Emily was different. She had always been the one person who quietly stood beside me. "Tell me what's happening," I said. She lowered her voice. "There's something Dad doesn't want you to see." My hand tightened around the edge of the counter. "What?" "I don't know everything. But last night, I found an envelope in his study with your name on it." My heart skipped. What was inside? I didn't open it. She paused. But Dad saw me holding it. Suddenly, I understood why she sounded terrified. "Emily, where are you?" "At the church. Everyone's arriving." Her voice cracked. "Please trust me. Come anyway. Just don't let Dad see you until I can talk to you alone." Then she hung up. I stood there staring at my phone, wondering what could possibly be inside an envelope my father had hidden from me. 20 minutes later, I grabbed my suit jacket, drove to the church, and parked 2 blocks away. I had barely stepped onto the sidewalk when I saw my father standing outside the entrance. He looked directly toward my car, as if he had been waiting for me, and slipped the envelope inside his jacket. And he was holding the same envelope. I stayed behind the parked cars, watching Dad straighten his tie as guests walked past him into the church. He looked completely calm, which somehow made everything worse. I pulled out my phone and texted Emily, "I'm here." "Where are you?" She answered almost immediately. "Back hallway." "Come alone." I waited until Dad turned toward a group of relatives, then slipped around the side entrance. Inside, the church was filled with flowers, soft music, and people dressed for a celebration, but I felt like I was walking into a room where everyone knew something except me. Emily found me near the storage hallway. She was already in her wedding dress, her eyes red from crying. The moment she saw me, she hugged me tightly. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "You shouldn't have to deal with this today." I stepped back. "What's in that envelope?" She glanced toward the sanctuary. "I don't know." "Then why is Dad carrying it?" She swallowed. "Because he took it from me." Emily explained that the previous night she had gone into Dad's study looking for an old family photograph she wanted displayed at the reception. While searching a cabinet, she found the envelope tucked behind a row of tax folders. My name was written across the front in Mom's handwriting. She recognized it because Mom had used the same handwriting on every birthday card she gave us. Before Emily could open it, Dad walked in. He snatched the envelope from her and told her it contained private financial information that had nothing to do with her wedding. But Emily knew Dad was lying because he rarely reacted that strongly to anything involving money. "What happened after that?" I asked. She looked down at her wedding ring. "He told me if you showed up today, he would make sure you embarrassed yourself in front of everyone." I almost laughed. "How?" "He said he had proof that you stole money from Mom before she died." The hallway seemed to tilt beneath me. "What?" Emily grabbed my arm. "I know you didn't." "Of course I didn't." She nodded quickly. "I know. But Dad said he has bank records." For years, I had wondered why Dad became colder toward me after Mom's illness. I had assumed grief had changed him. Now, for the first time, I wondered if something else had happened. Emily looked toward the sanctuary. "There's more." She reached into the pocket of her dress and pulled out a small brass key. "I found this under the envelope." I stared at it. A tiny paper tag was attached to the key, and written on it were 3 words, "Mom's storage box." My mother had rented a storage unit before she died, but Dad had always told us it was emptied years ago. Emily closed my fingers around the key. "The unit is 10 minutes from here." Before I could answer, we heard Dad calling her name. Emily quickly stepped away. "Go," she whispered. "Find out what's in that box before he does." I slipped through the side door, got into my car, and drove toward the storage facility. But when I reached the gate, I noticed something that made my blood run cold. Dad's truck was already parked inside. I parked across the street and watched Dad's truck sit beneath a row of dusty maple trees. For a moment, I considered calling Emily and telling her everything. Then I remembered the fear in her voice and decided I needed to know what Dad was hiding before I confronted him. I waited until his truck pulled away, then entered the storage facility with the brass key. The manager checked my name against an old authorization form and frowned. "Your mother's listed as the renter," he said. "But there's a note here saying the contents were supposed to be released to you." I stared at him. "To me?" He nodded. "After her death." My father had never mentioned that. The unit was small, barely large enough for a few boxes and an old wooden cabinet. Most of it was covered in dust, but one cardboard box sat near the back with a fresh strip of tape across the top. My name was written on it in Mom's handwriting. My hand started shaking. I opened it carefully. Inside were bank statements, property documents, several photographs, and a sealed letter addressed to me. I recognized Mom's handwriting immediately. The first page contained a date from 8 months before she died. She had written that she was worried about Dad moving money from an account she had opened for my future. I read the sentence twice before it sank in. There was a second page listing several transfers. The money had not gone to Dad. It had gone to Daniel. Tuition. Car payments. A house deposit. Medical bills. Thousands of dollars. Money Mom had intended to divide equally between her children. At the bottom of the page, Mom had written one sentence that made my chest tighten: "If your father tells you that you took anything from me, ask him where the money went." I sat on the dusty floor, staring at those words. Suddenly, years of resentment began rearranging themselves in my head. Dad hadn't simply favored Daniel. He had been using Mom's money to do it, then blaming me for the financial damage. But there was something else inside the box. A small digital recorder. I pressed the power button, expecting nothing. Instead, Mom's voice filled the storage unit. "If you're hearing this, something happened that I was afraid of." I froze. She sounded weak, but calm. "Your father knows about the account. He may tell you I changed my mind about the money." I didn't. Then she mentioned a date, an account number, and a meeting with Dad at the bank. Before the recording ended, she said, "There is one person who knows the truth. His name is Martin Hale. He was our bank manager." I immediately searched the papers and found his business card. Then my phone rang. It was Emily. I answered. "Where are you?" she asked. "I found Mom's letter." She went silent. Then she whispered, "You need to come back to the church. Dad just announced something to everyone." "What?" Her voice broke. "He told them you stole Mom's money." I drove back to the church with Mom's letter and the recorder sitting on the passenger seat. By the time I arrived, the ceremony was over, but nobody had gone to the reception. Guests stood in small groups inside the church, whispering while Dad stood near the altar with Daniel beside him. Emily was crying beside her fiancé. The moment Dad saw me, his face changed. "You shouldn't be here," he said. I walked toward him without answering. Then I placed Mom's letter on the table between us. "You told everyone I stole from her," I said quietly. "So let's talk about where her money actually went." Dad stared at the papers. Daniel stepped closer, but I held up my hand. "Not yet." I explained what I found in the storage unit. Dad immediately called the documents fake. Then I played the recording. Mom's voice filled the silent church, telling us about the account, the transfers, and the meeting she had arranged with the bank manager. Dad's face went pale. Daniel looked at him. "Dad," he whispered. I handed Emily the final page from the box. It contained Martin Hale's name and a handwritten note from Mom asking him to preserve the account records if anything happened to her. Emily called him from the church. He answered on the second ring. He confirmed everything. The account had belonged to Mom, and she had instructed the bank to divide the remaining balance equally between her children. But shortly before her death, Dad had withdrawn nearly all of it using paperwork that claimed Mom had changed her wishes. Martin had kept copies because he had questioned the signature. Dad finally lowered his eyes. Nobody spoke for several seconds. Then Daniel walked away from him. "You told me that money was yours," he said. Dad tried to explain that he had only done what was best for the family. Daniel shook his head. "No. You did what was best for me. I expected to feel victorious, but I didn't. I only felt tired." Emily came toward me and hugged me, still wearing her wedding dress. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "For all of it." I told her she didn't need to apologize for Dad's choices. Then she smiled through her tears. "You came anyway." I looked at her and remembered the phone call that morning. "You asked me not to let Dad see me," I said. "I know," she replied. "Because I was afraid he'd ruin your life again." She took my hand and led me toward the reception hall. Before we entered, I looked back once. Dad was standing alone beneath the church lights, holding Mom's old photograph. For the first time, I realized I didn't need him to admit what he had done. The truth had already spoken for itself. I walked into my sister's wedding, sat beside her, and watched her begin the life she had chosen. I didn't get revenge that day. I got something quieter, the freedom to stop carrying a lie that had never belonged to me.